Hello, how are you faring, folks? I'm Amanda Ambles on my little amble this morning, and I'm just imbibing the beautiful colours of the primroses, of the bird song, of the twisted oak trees over there. And I was just reflecting on the way over this morning just how loud it feels like everything's become. Everything to me recently has felt very brash, very loud, very in your face, and actually quite violent in a way. And unfortunately, I think that this is being reflected in human relationships. I think people are feeling very disorientated, discombobulated, and from what I can see, not really coming from a very rational place. People are overreacting to each other. Maybe people are stressed. Perhaps even we are overstimulated. I think all the things that we're exposed to, perhaps we are supposed to live a far simpler way. I follow a lovely lady called Solo in the Woods, and she lives in an off-grid cabin in Maine. And her name's Barbara. She's really wonderful. She's in her 70s and reflecting back on her life. And I've also recently been reading some of Thoreau and how he retreated to a shed for 2 years. And in that time, worked out that he only actually really needed to work for something like 6 weeks a year. But I am feeling like a lot of people are on this treadmill, emotional. There's been a lot of emotional turmoil going on. And I can kind of see the microcosm and the macrocosm. In Glastonbury, I think it's very reflective of perhaps what's going on at the world at large. And I feel like in the town that I live in, there's a lot of people screaming for attention, whether that's spiritual attention, political attention, whatever that is. And it feels very much like there's a lot of sort of playground politics, playground tactics going on. So I've very much taken a step back, both from kind of friendship relationships and also, politically. I've just felt that this is the time that I need to do this personally. In my life, I've lived in a village in Africa for over 2 years in Botswana, and I have seen different ways of life. And I know sometimes we see it through the filter very much of a Western person with our Western comforts in our comfort zone. And somehow, we know that there is the horror of war, but somehow maybe the horror of war is over there somewhere. So because it doesn't impact on our everyday life, we don't necessarily engage with it in an emotional way. Perhaps we've become desensitized. Perhaps we're becoming numb. How do you feel about that? Maybe as technology improves and we have it at our fingertips, perhaps communication is changing, and perhaps we're not connecting quite in a way that's so deep or so heart to heart, if you like. So it does feel very much like the way people relate to each other is shifting and changing. And I don't want to be all gloom and doom, because there's enough doom stuff going around. But I think we have to find what works for us as individuals. What might work for me may not work for you. So I think we've got to know ourselves, we've got to respect ourselves, and then we've got to act accordingly. And sometimes we don't know why, but we need to just retreat. And it does seem like every time we step out of our front door, there is a lot to deal with. And it seems increasingly so. I work in a shop now a few days a week, which I do really enjoy, but there's that interface, it's that interaction with people, which can be really lovely. And you know, I get magicians, wizards, witches coming in the shop. I get Mexican therapists. That's just in the last few weeks. So, you know, it's always interesting. It's always varied. But I myself personally always feel a little bit like I'm a fly on the wall to the situation, a bit of an outsider. I think there's a word for that. And it's not an introvert or extrovert, it's something else, and I'll look a bit more into that. But it does often feel like I'm a misfit, I'm an outsider looking in. Even on my own life sometimes it feels like that. And what I love about YouTube is it can be quite voyeuristic when people are sharing their feelings, what's going on for them. What keeps it real for me are things, you know, times like this where I'm walking out in nature, when I'm having a cold shower, when I'm having great conversations with people, when I'm dancing in the kitchen. And it doesn't have to be really profound what I'm doing, like writing some great novel, although I'd love to do that as well. I think that just strip it back to the simplicity and cold showers, stepping out of our comfort zone. Again, Solo in the Woods was talking about she doesn't have a bathroom and she goes out and she showers in the rain, and I'm sure she heats her water over her wood burner and then she cleans herself that way. And I do also like sort of looking at van lifers and how they cope as well. And you know, it is really good to contemplate different ways of living, and it does seem like more and more people are venturing out and exploring different things, which is quite exciting, really, isn't it? I mean, I've lived in a yurt, I've lived in a horse box. I know I've got quite a few friends who live on barges, which is absolutely amazing as well. And it's good to just have different perspectives, different lifestyles. There's the bull roarers. What have you done with it? What have you done? Where's the bull roars? Where's he gone? Where's it gone? What have you done? Where did it go? I've also been contemplating lately about, you know, this whole thing of bread and circuses, and why do performers get paid so much money? You know, whether they're footballers or they're artists, they're singers, actors. And it's interesting, I've been revisiting Bill Cooper, and why he says they get paid so much is they are a distraction from what's really going on behind the scenes. So this is why they get paid huge sums of money. And this is also has made me look at and think about celebrity status and how some celebrities, like Kate Bush, like Cillian Murphy, and a few other celebrities, don't really like the limelight on their personal life. And they let their work, their music or their acting speak for itself. And those are the kind of artists that I admire the most. When you think about it, we are all the main characters in our own life, aren't we? We're the main celebrities in our own world, in our own life. So why should we also constantly look to celebrities? And some people have debunked things like the music industry. Mark Devlin, for instance, and he talks about how many of the musicians and people in the music industry have sold their souls to the devil. And it's interesting, isn't it? Those people who don't embrace Hollywood, like Cillian Murphy, who I really do admire, he gets on the plane and he goes back to his family. Instead of having all this glamour and fame and all of the other things that they get up to in Hollywood, He's just a really down-to-earth guy who happens to be brilliant at acting. He's self-taught. But yeah, when will people start to realise that we actually don't really need gurus, we don't really need celebrities at all. In fact, you know, it should be that we are the main celebrities. Our dogs, our family are the main celebrities in our lives. So, you know, we can all play these parts, but at the end of the day, it's the real life, the actual life that's unfolding in front of us that is really going on. And it's not necessarily what we're experiencing behind a screen. So what I was saying about being numbed, being desensitized, if we could cut down our screen time and just, cavort with nature a bit more, then that would be great, wouldn't it? And also they say that the people who come into our lives, you know, it's all scripted, it's all been planned beforehand. So is it that we've chosen those people, those parents, those children, those significant others in our lives? Is that preordained or not? And again, you know, nothing is forever necessarily. It could be that you have that connection forever. I feel very strongly with my dog Magic that my connection will never stop, will never die. But also we live in a culture which is very easy come, easy go. I think I've talked about this before. And it seems more and more that relationships aren't necessarily. They might just be there for a season or a day or a moment. Actually, there's a Brian Patton poem about each other's light. I think Mark Mays has read it out once. And it's an amazing poem, and it's just about those glimpsing moments of intensity that you have when you see somebody else's aura or energy and you're in that. So yeah, just a few ramblings today on my walk, and nice to have you here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this from today. You take care, and remember, get out into nature as much as you can. Loads and loads of love. Amanda Ambles, signing off.